welcome back to Normal Islands. I'm Curtis Daly, and tonight I'm joined by a friend of the show, Helena, aka No Justice MTG. How are we?
I'm doing very well today, Curtis. I hope you're doing well too.
After a bit of a false start, then I'm feeling pretty good. We've got some really exciting, well, I suppose exciting is probably the best way to put it, but some big stories to cover
Very big.
tonight. Healthcare CEO assassin has potentially been caught. Benjamin Netanyahu faces corruption trial. Assad has fled Syria after rebels take down the government, and Israel exploits Syrian situation for more land grabs. As always, make sure you like the stream and leave a comment to boost the algorithm. You know it helps, so please, if you haven't liked it, hit the thumbs up. Okay, on to our first story. So, suspect believed to be the United Healthcare CEO assassin has been brought in for questioning. The suspect was found in Pennsylvania in a McDonald's with a bunch of fake IDs, the same gun that was used, and with a manifesto. The person's name is Luigi Mangione, and his Twitter account has been revealed. Now, this person has been retweeting the likes of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. He has been sharing some incel and right-wing content, and he's kind of a tech bro. Now, we initially thought that maybe this was some sort of class war on the horizon, but it turns out it could just be the same old story, which is right-winger, possibly incel with a gun. Helena, I want to get your reaction to this. I mean, you're not jumping to conclusions whether he's right-winger or not. I'm not surprised with the makeup of the person, of what we know so far, but it still obviously shows that this isn't a left-right issue when it comes to healthcare.
I mean, I was scanning through some of the news stories, and of course, the information is breaking as we go live. So all of these things are going to be coming out in dribs and drabs over the next hours and the next couple of days as well, as we kind of get a bigger profile of what the killer is going to be like. But the manifesto is reported, this is by the New York Post, so take it with a pinch of salt, to say such things as these parasites had it coming, and imagine a society where they make everybody unhappy and then sell you drugs to make you happier. So regardless of whether this person has particular social or cultural opinions, looking at his feed there's a kind of a big mishmash of stuff about the failure of liberal society creating people who are hyper individualized, right? These are kind of critiques that you get from both the left and the right. So the jury is still out, but personally, I think that even if we don't take this individual's opinions as being obvious to everyone right now, what we can look at is a broad societal problem that we have, which is the issue with liberalism and its way to identify problems. A lack of materialist analysis of how problems develop will always lead to individualized solutions, rather than saying, well, the healthcare industry is to blame, rather than saying the structure and the incentives behind privatized healthcare very specifically is to blame. People will always say, well, this CEO decided to prioritize people over profit over people, or this system was deliberately designed by some malevolent fifth column to make society sick and then try and sell them a product to make people happier, one being unhappy because of the system they created, right? It's very easy to say that this was some kind of malevolent force in the background that decided to create this feedback loop, or that had this very specific desire to put profit over people. When, if you're looking at this from a materialist perspective, you understand that it doesn't matter whether it's Brian Thompson, a CEO of United Healthcare, or literally anybody else that they've pulled out of whatever pool of potential CEOs there might be. The reality, of course, is that this is a problem of capitalism itself. It is the profit motive that creates this particular dynamic. People don't put profit over people because they somehow like it when people die. It's because that's the fiduciary responsibility of every single publicly traded private company, that it has to, as its primary purpose, drive value for shareholders. Any amount of human suffering that arises from that, whether it's people who aren't covered, people who are covered who don't get those things remunerated from their insurance, or whether it's people who get screwed over by failed policies from private healthcare corporations, these haven't been done specifically and malevolently to try and make people unhappy or to make people sick or to make people angry. It's been done because they want to make money, because that's what the sole interest of every single company is. The externality is irrelevant to the initial transaction of MCM Prime, which is turning money into a commodity, into money plus profit. Simple as that. It's incredibly simple to understand the driving force behind capitalist accumulation and capitalist market economies, and why we get this position in the first place. But unless you have a fundamental critique of capitalism that is based in the material outcomes and the material interests of the classes of people who are represented in capitalism, you're going to otherwise try and say, well, there could be a different capitalism, right? This could be a problem with people at the top who are choosing to make these decisions, when of course it is not.
I mean, it almost doesn't matter what his politics is, does it? I mean, whether he's a lefty or right winger, the truth is he is still someone who is a victim of private healthcare, and maybe trying to marginalise someone on a particular wing of the political spectrum is sort of playing into the sort of liberal individualism, because there is one person who has been doing that, and that's Ben Shapiro. Over the weekend, this was the original story we're going to go with, but we're still going to sort of chuck it in there. Ben Shapiro, other big right-wing content creators such as Matt Walsh, they went on YouTube and said, this is the fault of the radical revolutionary left, and they're all murderers and they're violent people, right? And what was really funny about that is the comment section under these videos were dragging him. They're saying this isn't a left-right issue. And trying to do that kind of means you're out of touch. I believe we actually have a clip from Ben Shapiro attacking just the left on this rather than looking at the bigger picture.
Bubbling under the surface of all this is something very serious, really serious. What is that serious thing? The revolutionary left is creeping into the mainstream. Yesterday we talked about liberals versus the left. Liberals are people who disagree with me on public policy, but aren't in favor of, the murder of their opponents. The left is a different thing. The shooting of Thompson has unleashed a wave of evil from members of the left. Thompson was not a criminal. He wasn't even an advocate of death, the way, for example, abortion or euthanasia advocates are. And by the way, murdering an abortionist or an advocate of euthanasia would be unjustifiable morally in a democratic system. Brian Thompson's great sin, according to these people, is that he was the head of a company that exists within a mixed private-public healthcare framework, and that he did his job, because that's how health insurance actually works. Some things are covered and some things are not. And you may not like the application of the coverage, and it may be bad. That is not an excuse for murder. But for the left, if you hate the system, you are morally justified in murdering anyone who acts within the system.
So, I mean, first of all, it's kind of strange that he says that Brian Thompson isn't someone who killed anyone. I mean, I think you can categorically say that the decisions he's made have killed people, right? Not just the fact that he's a healthcare CEO. That's one thing. Being in that position, you're already in a position where you're killing people just based on trying to, increase your profits for the shareholders. But him specifically, and I don't want to individualize it, but him specifically has done some terrible things, such as using AI to process claims, and 90% of it have been wrong. So people have been denied claims for their health insurance when they were entitled to it because the guy wanted to, save money. But the comment section was really funny. It was probably some of his own supporters and others who came to his video and said, look, this isn't a left-right issue. And in fact, you're the problem because you're trying to divide us when actually, at the end of the day, we all suffer from private healthcare. There are people saying, I'm a conservative and my dad died of cancer because he wasn't given the healthcare he needed. And I suppose the danger, the trap that we don't want to fall into, and I know the title of this stream is called Was a Right Winger. I will admit this was cobbled together literally within minutes. I guess I had less time to really get into the conversation, which is what we're having now, by the way. The worst thing we could do on the left is say, well, actually, he was a right winger. It doesn't matter about his politics, as you've just alluded to. What matters is raising the class consciousness of people and understanding whether you're conservative, liberal, if you are someone who is being exploited through healthcare, that puts us in the same economic position, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. Absolutely puts people in the same position. What I think is very interesting in the kind of broad failure of the neoliberal consensus that we've seen over the past however many weeks and days and months and years of neoliberalism continually failing to actually create a livable society for people to want to actually participate in. I mean, famously, neoliberals don't believe in such a thing as society. People, whether they go to the radical right or the far left, they understand that this over-individualization, this atomization of society has created a bunch of market economic, societal, and political failures that cannot be solved by more individualism. There is this, the hyper-individualism of neoliberalism has created a consensus of people who want to see more collective policy being enacted. And, the issue is how do you capture that? Do you capture that in the kind of tweets we saw from this man talking about how we need to fix the kind of cultural breakdown of Japan, not with immigration, but by promoting these different kind of spiritual causes, or saying, well, actually, no, the real issue is class consciousness. If we want to find a community, we want to find a collective of people who share similar interests to be able to create a better society for people, that's going to have to come through class consciousness, through people finding the avenues with which that collectively, as people have the same material interest of being opposed to the domination of the bourgeois, to being opposed to having the thumb of the private healthcare CEO either point up or point down in your direction as to whether or not you can afford or even be able to have access to care in the first place, that is the kind of allyship that we're going to have to take. People are finding it very easy to be distracted by cultural bullshit that massively impedes us from able to find common cause on class issues. And this is the deliberate tactic people like Ben Shapiro, people like Matt Walsh have been continually employed to be able to do. One of the highest rated comments in Ben Shapiro's comment section on the video that he released about the healthcare shooter was somebody saying, I've just realized that the point of your channel is to distract us from the things I'll start that one again. One of the highest rated comments on Ben Shapiro's video about this was one person saying, I've just realized that the whole point of your channel is to divide people who otherwise would be normal people who unite together, or something to those ends, about how his channel wouldn't function if it wasn't to try and find ways to divide normal people. We've seen the memes that go around on the internet about how they're trying to make you fight a culture war so that you don't fight a class war. Well, who's the person who funds Ben Shapiro?
Yep.
It's people like Turning Point. It's people like the Koch brothers and the Wilkes brothers who fund PragerU. The people who have the capitalist interest in ensuring people do not unite on class consciousness fund these media outlets to divide people further.
I welcome people like Ben Shapiro to continue the culture war, because that's only going to show people how out of touch he is. That comment you said, the highest rated one, which is like, I've just realized that you're just trying to divide us. We need people to realize that those on the political right only talk about culture wars because they understand that what truly unifies us all is class. That's, at the end of the day, it's class that unifies us. And I really hope they continue to push this line. And I expect they will, by the way. And people will wake up and think, do you know what? Those on the political right don't have my interest at heart. Now, of course, there's going to be more and more developments about this suspect. And we are going to cover as more comes out. But obviously, there's only so much we can really speculate on. But I thought it is an important thing to address. But we are going to move on to our second story. Benjamin Netanyahu faces his trial next week on corruption charges. He is up against 3 separate cases of corruption filed in 2019, Case 1000, Case 2000 and Case 4000, which include allegations of bribery, fraud and breach of trust. He denies any wrongdoing and claims to be the victim of a politically orchestrated witch hunt. I mean, we've heard that one before, haven't we? By rivals and the media to remove him from office. Now, these are the following specifics of the trial. Case 1000, also known as the Gifts Affair. This case charges the Israeli Prime Minister with fraud and breach of trust. It involves allegations that Netanyahu and his wife Sarah, I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, received lavish gifts from 2 wealthy businessmen in exchange for political favours. The businessmen are Arnon Milchan, an Israeli Hollywood film producer, and Australian billionaire James Packer. The gifts allegedly include champagne and cigars. Milchan testified that he provided gifts to Netanyahu in June 2020. Case 2000. It says Netanyahu made a deal with businessman Aaron Moses, a controlling shareholder of the Israeli daily Yedoeth Aronoth. I think my pronunciation today has been pretty off today. For favourable coverage in exchange for legislation to slow the growth of the rival Israel Hayom newspaper. This case also charges him with fraud and breach of trust. Case 4000. This case indicts Netanyahu for granting regulatory favours to Israeli telecommunications company Bezek in return for positive coverage of him and his wife on a news website controlled by its former chairman. Netanyahu, in his capacity as communications minister at the time, allegedly provided regulatory benefits to Shaul Elevich, the owner of Bezek, who also controlled the news website Walla. Now, Netanyahu was trying to push the dates of the trial again, citing the situation in Syria, which has now been rejected. Helena, what do you make of this trial? Netanyahu could fail or fall based on corruption, but not on a genocide. Do you expect anything to happen?
I don't really think so. It's been clear for a very long time that Netanyahu has his very much his political desire is to maintain power at any cost, even if it undermines the existence of the state of Israel. In which so much so that we've seen an international outpouring of support for Palestine in response to what he's done. He has massively impacted the Israeli economy and Israeli society in ways that doesn't help the regular Israeli, regardless, of how much the ideology that a lot of people within Israeli society adhere to is one that we think is being very disagreeable, to put it mildly. At the very least, he has always been somebody who puts his own interests ahead of everybody else's. We saw this with his attempt at judicial reform. Why else would he want to do judicial reform, to try and centralize power in his own hands, unless he had some threat on him of them wanting to oppose his premiership? And now we see this is exactly the kind of people who are going to be the arbiters of whether or not that he gets to continue being in power, is whether or not he can be indicted on these charges, these claims, and then we can only see from then whether or not he'll be able to hold on to power and hold on to government. It's if you are an ideologically motivated, like pro-Zionist person within Israeli society, you probably don't want someone in charge of your country who takes the plausible deniability that Israel had before October 2023 and has broadcast to the world the reality of the Zionist project, the reality of the occupation. You'd want them to be removed from government, despite the fact that he actually is overall seeing an increase in approval rating from where it was about 6 months ago, where other political parties were much higher than him. It's clear that there is political motivation within Israeli society to get rid of him as well, because he undermines their own projects with his want and desire to cause as much destruction in Palestine as possible. So I understand, even if these things aren't true, I think they probably are true. The man is obviously corrupt to high heaven. But if they are trumped up charges, which I've not seen evidence that they are, you'd think it was politically motivated from his enemies in government, who want there to be a more optically, I guess, more optically favourable Israeli government in charge during the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, there's been protests against Netanyahu, and they've been protesting him not because they're horrified about the policies he's been doing in terms of like treating ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and the genocide, but they think he's undermining the Israeli cause, which is true. And I mean, it's very funny that hubris and his ego could be diminishing Israeli standing in what they're doing. But at the same time, you think the structures are in place where it doesn't really matter. I mean, we've seen, given the fact that Israel broken international law over and over again, and they haven't gone anywhere, and no one's really been held to account, it kind of feels like, well, throwing a couple of corruption charges probably won't make much of a difference. But of course, it's the opinions of Israeli citizens who see it that way. I kind of agree. I'm not really sure what to expect from this. If Netanyahu fails because of a couple of cigars and a bit of money from billionaire barons rather than genocide, that would be crazy. I mean, I would take whatever we can get though if this guy could be gone. But you just got to think, who's going to be replaced after him? But I'm sure he'll wiggle his way out because he seems to do that a lot. I have been getting a few comments saying that Helena is out of sync. Is that still true? And I don't know, Helena, have you had any trouble with your audio today?
I think I've had some sync problems here on my end. The software I think that we're using for the broadcast is straining my system and it's slowing down my camera.
Oh, I see. Okay. He does catch back up. Well, what we do, one of the good features of this software is that it does local recording. So even if the current stream isn't perfect, when we do clips later on, it will all be high quality, perfectly synced. But I hope it's not too bad. I hope it doesn't distract you too much. But again, that's what I would say. Maybe support us financially so we can upgrade our systems. That was another shameful plug. Now, if you haven't liked the stream already, please do that. And if you're not subscribed, make sure you do hit the notification bell. I've had so many people tell me that they're subscribed, but they don't know when we're going live. Also, once the live is finished, please come over and drop a comment. That really helps the algorithm. If you want to see Turn Left continue to grow, then make sure you share this video online, tell your friends and family about us. There are currently only a handful of us working voluntarily, and we want to be in a position where we're paid for our work, and this is our full-time job. This would massively help. One of the things is, writing scripts last minute, which is what happened today when stories change, because obviously we've got a full-time work and then we do this. It makes it a little bit harder. But also your financial support can help upgrade equipment, better streaming software, for example. We can create more ambitious content. We've done it before. We've done some brilliant interviews with Jeremy Corbyn, Zach Polanski. We've done some Vox Pops in the street, but there's too far and few between. It costs money to get the train down to London, all that sort of thing. I like to see interviews, in-person interviews, and Vox Pops every week, and that can happen. We also would like to have a studio. So if you can help in any way, please let us help us build a socialist media alternative. You can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to donate. You can also follow us on Blue Sky. Our handle is at turnleftmedia.co.uk. Do we have any comments ready in the chat? Oh, Kay Morton, 10 memberships. That's really, really generous. Thank you so much for your generosity. Jacqueline, Jack H. Aren't CEOs legally supposed to prioritise profit over people as they have a... Sorry, it's really small. Fiduciary duty to their shareholders. Yeah, so that's the problem with our shareholder democracy that we have. The CEOs are legally binding to support shareholders. They can be done for it, which is why you don't get like a conscious CEO who does the right thing, because the system is built in a way that the CEO can never do the right thing. And that's not excusing the bastards, by the way. And that's not excusing Brian Thompson. He truly is a bad, terrible person. But that's the way the system is set up, because it's an economy that's rigged for the 1%. Scottish Soul, the ones who care about having affordable universal health... Excuse me. The ones who care about having affordable universal healthcare don't need to bring their political beliefs into it, because it's a human right, something that capitalists doesn't seem to grasp. Well, that's kind of what we were saying earlier. It doesn't really matter what your politics is, because your material standing is your material standing. Whether this guy is right-wing or not, he is still someone who's exploited by the private healthcare industry, as so many Americans are. For us, we still have an NHS, but United Health Group has some contracts in our NHS. It is being sold off. I do worry about the future. Let's go to another one. Genie Bottle, the 1% who are super evil, elite wealthy control 18%, who then see 80% are divided and 1% are too good to try and change. Yet the world needs pushing or gets undue stress and collapses. The problem is, it's true. The economy is rigged for the few, but the few have all that power. They control the means of communication, whether it's corporate media, whether it's now new alternative right-wing media, whether it's Twitter. So it doesn't matter if there's only a few of them, because they control so much. The most powerful tool the billionaires have done is to brainwash us into thinking that actually we need to be distracted, whether it's wokeness or immigrants. And it's a far better tool than to physically oppress people. To say, like, oh yeah, we are trying to oppress you. It's better to distract people to think that actually they're not being oppressed. It's we've got another comment apparently in two parts from Jacqueline again. Obviously, the people talking about Netanyahu taking Netanyahu to court for corruption are anti-Semitic. Seriously, though, Netanyahu needs to be in court facing more serious charges than being corrupt. Yeah, I mean, on our last show, we covered David Menzer, the Israeli spokesperson, former member of the Labour Right, by the way, British person, called Amnesty anti-Semitic. So everything is anti-Semitic. It really waters down the word. And it worries me, because genuine cases of anti-Semitism is being trivialised by these bastards, frankly. And our last one, Dominic Jones. Dominic Jones has become a member. Thank you so much. Welcome to Turn Left. I really appreciate you joining us. We are going to move on. Now, Syria has been plunged into chaos after the rebels Hayat Tahrir al-Sham have managed to topple the Assad regime. The brutal dictatorship, which has been ongoing since 2011, finally fell after rebels on the 27th of November launched a surprise attack against the government. The rebels now have control over Aleppo, the second biggest city, and as of the 8th of December, which is yesterday, the Syrian rebels made way to Damascus, the capital. Within hours, Assad fled, with reports claiming he's escaped to Russia. Keir Starmer released a statement on the fall of the Syrian government. The developments in Syria in recent hours and days are unprecedented, and we are speaking to our partners in the region and monitoring the situation closely. The Syrian people have suffered under Assad's barbaric regime for too long, and we welcome his departure. Our focus is now on ensuring a political solution prevails and peace and stability is restored. We call on all sides to protect civilians and minorities and ensure essential aid can reach the most vulnerable in the coming hours and days. I really had to stop myself from doing that in a Keir Starmer voice. I don't think it would have been appropriate. It's a very short and very generic statement from Keir Starmer. But, okay, I celebrate the downfall of Assad, but I think celebrating it's too early, because this may be the end of a brutal dictatorship, but the rebels are religious fundamentalists. Rebels have been backed by the West, who aren't moderates. I mean, where have I heard that from? It seems really, really familiar. We are now seeing in real time the media trying to do PR for the rebels, who are ex-Al-Qaeda. So you can see these two headlines from CNN and BBC, painting this new rebel leader as a blazer-wearing reformed radical. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible for him to be de-radicalized, but all too often we hear about the West backing extremists. We heard it before when they said there are loads of moderates in the region, and there isn't. I'll start that one again. The HTS are currently recognised as a terrorist organisation in the UK. So it kind of puts the UK in a difficult situation. Do we back the rebels but still have them as terrorists, or it's really stupid? Helena, I want to get your first thoughts on this, particularly with Starmer and other Western leaders sort of celebrating the fall of Assad, but there's no acknowledgement of the concerns about what could take over. I don't think we've got any audio from you, Helena.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Brill. So I think broadly, what we always see is that the enemy of my enemy is my friend is a political philosophy that always has its downsides. No one ever thinks about the long-term consequences of what happens when these things come to pass. You know, we've seen it time and time and time again. Now, whatever your thoughts are about Saddam Hussein, you know, plenty of terrible, terrifying, and atrocious things he did when he was in charge of Iraq. The deposition of Saddam Hussein by Western-backed forces and Western forces themselves led to a power vacuum that then led to the ISIS that had to be removed from the region afterwards as well. The political instability that was created by the toppling of Saddam Hussein led to further political fallout that had huge geopolitical ramification for years and decades to come. Now, again, whether or not you support Saddam Hussein or whether you support his deposition, which I'm sure a lot of people did because he was a terrifying dictator, you again have to control for the things that come afterwards. The same is true of Afghanistan, where there wasn't specifically Western forces actually going in themselves. It was incredibly Western-backed Islamic extremists, so let's be fair, right, Salafi, Wahhabist, incredibly reactionary Islamist groups are the ones funded directly by the West. You know, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar took loads of weapons from the UK government, had personal chats with Margaret Thatcher herself, and they deposed the PDPA in Afghanistan. And you'll be trying to say that Afghanistan was better under the Taliban than under the PDPA. I think it'd be very difficult to try and say that that was a better situation. Now, there are certain disparate elements within the rebel groups. It's not just Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. There's the SNA, there's the FSA, there's loads of different groups within Syria who are going to be vying for control in a future Syrian administration. And of course, I have no personal feelings towards Assad being toppled that are negative. I think that the man was a brutal authoritarian dictator, and it's clear from the celebrations that we've seen from Syrians inside and outside Syria that they're glad that he's gone. Right? I share the feelings of the Syrians. I share their sympathy. I share sympathy with them over them seeing the dictator of however many decades finally being dethroned in the country that they love. But the question is, what's going to come afterwards? How much more fighting are we going to have to do? Are people in Syria going to have to do? What's going to happen between these forces if they can even agree some kind of governing administration? This is all something that again, none of this has been planned for by anybody who was maybe covertly supported these different groups. For example, the SNA were backed by Turkey. Is this someone who we want to have power in Syria? Clearly it is not. Clearly we don't want people who have such a vicious hatred towards the Kurds, who are the people who are, let's be real, the only good guys in this entire conflict. Like, how can we get these people's protection when someone who's explicitly backed by Turkey now has a potential governing role inside Syria? So to try and whitewash the difficulties that are going to come out of the future of Syria post Assad as just being, well, yeah, the regime is toppled and we can just forget about it for now, is some really short-sighted thinking. And again, it's difficult. It's difficult to find a synthesis of opinion on this because, all sides are bad. Everyone is problematic. I win the discourse, but it's preparing. It's preparing for a future where the turmoil in Syria probably won't end very quickly, and we've got to be prepared to deal with that.
Yeah, look, when we look at these situations, it's not about backing the right person or the one with the... It's essentially you want to have stability. And I think this is where a lot of us on the left are painted as sort of supporters of dictators when we say we don't like us going into Iraq. We don't like us invading other countries because it creates a huge vacuum. And they'll say, well, you support the dictators. It's not true. I can happily say that Assad is a brutal dictator, but it does worry me what happens. And when you have a power vacuum and you have different forces vying for control, often there's more violence. And again, I agree with you. I completely sympathize with the idea that people in Syria are very happy that Assad is gone. But what worries me is it comes after. What's really astonishing, though, is the lack of competence from our Western leaders in terms of foreign policy. You hit the nail on the head, the lack of planning. And it's not like it's the first time. This keeps on happening. It's like, did they not understand that this could be a scenario? Did they not understand that Assad could go and there'll be a vacuum of power? Where's your planning? And it feels like these guys, Washington, they have not got a single clue. And what really worries me now is not necessarily the rebels within Syria. It's not necessarily just the civil war. It's other nations surrounding. And we're going to come into that in a minute, actually. But other nations looking at Syria and going, they're destabilized now. We're going to exploit it.
Oh yeah, 100%, right? There's going to be a lot of internal discussion as to who gets to be the one to play kingmaker in Syria.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the US and US aligned forces have clearly chosen that they wanted the FSA, who were the US-backed rebels in Syria. They clearly wanted to be the kingmakers, and it's not quite come to pass in the way that they expected. But continually just having shadow influences in other countries is going to lead to this level of political destabilization, and always has done, right? And again, we looked at other differences. You can look at the similarities in a post-Gaddafi Libya, for example. Has it gone better for Libya? Well, clearly the slave markets and the completely disintegrated society shows that it hasn't been. And again, this is always a lack of forward planning of well, we dislike this person, so we're going to back literally anybody who opposes them. That's not going to be a recipe for responsible statecraft now, is it?
I agree. We are going to move on to our next story, but it kind of links with Syria because we're kind of staying with that. And that is Israel. So Israel is exploiting the fall of the Syrian government by expanding their control in the Golan Heights. Israel has seized territory in Syrian-controlled areas of the Golan Heights as its military warned Syrians living in 5 villages close to the Israeli-occupied portion of the strategic area to stay home. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he ordered Israeli forces to grab a buffer zone in the Golan Heights established by a 1974 ceasefire agreement with Syria after a lightning advance by Syrian opposition forces ended Bashar Assad's rule. When asked about the question of expanding territories, Labour cabinet member Pat McFadden gave the most unsurprising, yet still absolutely disgraceful answer.
Bombed some targets inside Syria over the last 24 hours. Israel has done the same. Where does that leave the UK? Do you fully support the action that they have been taking?
What I think Israel's doing is making sure its position in the Golan is secure. One of the things to note about this has partly happened because of Israeli action against Iranian proxies around the region, and that has left Iran weakened, and that is partly why the Assad regime has fallen. So the action that Israel has taken over the last few days will be to make sure that its position in the Golan is secure.
So that's supported by the UK?
We will always support Israel's right to defend itself and make itself secure.
how is this defending themselves? They're clearly trying to colonize as much land as possible. Helena, the entirety of the Golan Heights has been a target for Israel for decades, and now they found their opportunity and beyond. But Labour says they have a right to defend themselves. So I guess I'm wrong then.
In the words of Zach Polanski on Twitter, is there literally anything the Israeli government will do that Labour won't give them a carte blanche for at this point? It's ridiculous, genuinely ridiculous. I mean, I say ridiculous as if this hasn't been Labour Party policy for half a century at this point. But like, let's be real, I'm not expecting miracles here. But at the very least, you could say, well, the Golan Heights is internationally recognised as the territory of Syria, and the United Nations internationally recognise Israel as illegally having annexed it and occupying it. Like, this isn't a controversial opinion. This isn't something that is, partisan to the left. This is international consensus that Israel is illegally occupying these areas. If Pat McFadden can genuinely go on Sky News and give Israel total support in their position in the Golan, as he says, which is, again, the position of being illegally annexing it, how on earth can you expect somebody like Pat McFadden to hold something at least reasonable with regards to, say, I don't know, the West Bank or Gaza or like any other area that Israel has previously or historically occupied? Do you think there are people out there who, at the time after the Six-Day War, in which Israel occupied the entirety of the Sinai Peninsula, just said, well, I know they've illegally annexed it in violation of every single international convention that we have, but I support their position in defending themselves? It's ridiculous, it's genuinely ridiculous that Pat McFadden can say such a thing, because obviously it's clearly a very specific land grab, Judea and Samaria, everything that we have seen thus far from everybody who has been at the top of the project that Israel has represented since its inception, believes that this land should be the sovereign territory of Israel. It's clear. There's always been expansionist aims across Judea and Samaria, and this is just the further entrenchment of that belief, rather than it being there's a buffer zone between us and Syria that they've always called it. Well, hang on a minute. If the people who are opposed to you have now been deposed from power, which is what they always said, well, we believe that the Assad regime is someone who was so hostile to us, we need a buffer zone in the Golan Heights to ensure Israel's protection. That's always been the kind of the line that they've gone with to cover up the colonization and annexation. And now they're going, well, now that he's been deposed, we're going to take more of the territory. That's the opposite of what you said. The people who are now more likely to be in power are more amenable to the Israeli government than the previous administration were. So that makes it the opposite of true. If anything, oh, well, now they've gone, we can afford to pull our forces back. No, they've done a territorial land grab because all these people understand.
And when will it end? And this is the thing, I was so astonished by that, because it's like there's no plausible deniability. You can say, look, Israel's trying to defend themselves against Palestinians. A lot of crap, by the way. We've covered that extensively. But how can you go on national TV and say, by the way, Israel's just did blatant land grab, and said, well, Israel's got a right to defend themselves. And I do ask the question, when will it stop? Where will it stop? And I don't think it will. I mean, is it going to be the entirety of Syria?
No, well, I don't think that's going to be the case. There's going to be plenty of international precedents that would make them. There would be something they wouldn't be able to get away with. Again, they've been able to get away with the Golan Heights up to this point because even in the face of international pressure, they've been able to. But I think there's enough pushback on Israel's expansionism in Palestine to want to make Israeli governing parties be a little bit more skeptical of how far that they can push with these things. But given that they've had access to the Golan Heights for so long, and with the international pushback being completely ignored and nothing having been done about it, I feel like they feel that specifically the Golan Heights is something that they can then annex forever. I mean, they've been going and speaking to the villagers in these areas and saying, you're now part of Israel. Please stay in your homes. You live here now. We're going to be the governing party in control of you. I don't know what the people inside these villages think. I haven't not spoken to them, but it's clear that they feel like this is something that they can get away with. But of course, the part that isn't surprising to anybody is the Western governments will back them, will back them to the hilt, and there is seemingly very little that they can do that will actually which will actually lead to Western governments engaging in proper criticism. I mean, if they didn't criticize for the illegal settlement building, because again, even the peace process negotiations included Israeli annexation of a bunch of these settlement areas anyway, and Western governments backed them in that, it's not surprising to see them back all of the annexation of all of the Golan Heights as well.
Yeah, no, it's insane situation. And actually, before we went live, there's some news that has reported that the Houthis attacked Israel with a drone. Then they managed to bypass their Israeli sirens before rockets managed to shoot down. and the IDF is investigating why the sirens didn't go off. That is the story we're going to cover as it unfolds. But I think going back to the point I said, with the vacuum of power in Syria, it's other states that are looking to exploit it. And let's be honest, it's mostly Israel. Now, this show's a little bit short because we did run late. So we are going to call it there. But these stories are continuing to develop. Really interesting stuff. Remember, if you haven't liked the stream already, please do. And if you're not subscribed, then make sure you do that too. Once again, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, before we leave it there, we'll go to some comments. I've got my producer in my ear speaking to me. If you want to get some up, we can probably start a conversation there. Turkey and Israel like a pair of pincers on Syria. Very good way of putting it. Yeah, true that. True. Holly Brigstock. McFadden is undermining the UN and principle of the established borders and international community policing of same. Yes, exactly. The Labour Party, who calls themselves, respected international people. That's my best Keir accent, by the way. Have never really respected that. And there's nothing to say anymore, is there? Are we all surprised? Not really. Let's go to another one. Charlotte, I know this is a crazy idea for the West, but imagine we ask the Syrian people what they want rather than doing what we want now. That's a very novel idea, isn't it? Very novel idea. Wonder if that would work. Let's go to another one. Becca A. Turning left can cause a lag, no joke. Well, clearly that's happened there. We've turned too far left? Never. Not a chance. Okay, that's probably all the comments we got. I do apologise, it's a bit of a shorter show, but it was a bit of a rush because all these stories came out quite last minute. We are going to be back actually on Thursday, so we've got a new schedule lined up for over Christmas. Usually we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we've got the debrief on a Sunday. For, I would say, temporarily, we're going to do Mondays, Thursdays of normal Ireland, and then Saturdays are the debrief, all at the same time as 7:30. Obviously, Christmas, people are busy, and we're all still volunteers. Sometimes it's quite hard to keep up with the level of shows. I expect I will be doing some more commentary videos in between, though. Remember, if you come back to this live after it's over, drop a comment. That helps the algorithm. And if you want to see Turn Left continue to grow, then make sure you share this video online, tell your friends and family. And if not subscribe, make sure you do. We want a position where we're working full time. That they're not making scripts 2 hours after work. That would be really good. And this is our full-time jobs. So you can support us by going to youtube.com/turnleft. Sorry, that's our YouTube channel. turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. Got so many links in my head. You can financially support us where we can upgrade our equipment, get better streaming software, and finally, we can get paid for our work. You can also follow us on Blue Sky. Our handle is @turnleftmedia.co.uk. Thank you so much for watching. We are going to be back this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Thank you, and see you next time.
Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.